The former Speaker of the US House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, has partly blamed President Biden for the Democrats' election loss, suggesting the party would have performed better if it left the race sooner. Ms. Pelosi played a key role in convincing Mr. Biden to end his re-election bid. But she told the New York Times the Democrats could have used more time to choose his replacement. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, told supporters his fight wasn't over.
We're going to have to work a little harder. We're going to have to fight a little harder. We're going to have to organize a little harder. But I'm here today to tell you this. We can do it. No, that's the wrong one. We will do it, and we'll do it together.
Meanwhile, Tehran rejected US allegations of an Iranian plot to assassinate President-elect Donald Trump before the presidential election. The Justice Department unsealed the criminal charges on Friday that alleged an unnamed official in Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard instructed the man to create a plan to surveil Donald Trump and carry out the plot. This was back in September. Officials added that the man has not been arrested and is believed to still be in Iran. Samira Hussain reports from Washington.
A political comeback of monumental proportions, but also a story of survival for the president-elect. Twice the former president avoided assassination attempts on the campaign trail, and now the government says it revealed a third plot, an Iranian asset planning to kill Mr. Trump. Tehran says the former president should face trial or face revenge for ordering the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.
2 assassination attempts on my life that we know of, and they may or may not involve, but possibly do, Iran.
The first, a narrow miss, the bullet just grazing Mr. Trump's ear. Just over 2 months later, a man with a rifle found at his golf course in Florida. Mr. Trump's communications director says the president is aware of the most recent plot, but nothing will deter him. So celebrations continue for Mr. Trump, for both surviving and winning this election. Samira Hussain, BBC News, Washington.
Rowan Bridge is our correspondent in Washington. He told me more about Nancy Pelosi's comments about President Biden.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen an awful lot of rancor and resentment on both sides. There is clearly a bit of a split within the party over who to blame for what went wrong here. You know, was this a fault of Joe Biden for not standing down earlier? Was it a fault of the Harris campaign for the campaign that they ran and the messages that they put forward? And we've seen both sides sort of briefing messages blaming the other, really. Nancy Pelosi, it's worth noting, is a very senior figure within the Democratic Party, and she, it's widely believed, wanted what they call an open primary. So effectively, for Joe Biden to stand down and then the party to have a competition and sort of leave it open to various politicians to come forward and throw their hats into the ring and have an open competition as to who should be the presidential candidate for this election. Now, in the end, what happened was that Joe Biden immediately threw his weight behind the vice president, and she very quickly sewed up the number of votes she needed to have the nomination. And that effectively, Joe Biden putting his thumb on the scales, effectively closed down the option of other people entering the race. Now, the question is, would that have made any difference? Nancy Pelosi suggested that Kamala Harris might still have become the candidate, but she would have effectively been more battle-tested when it came to the election, perhaps better known to members of the public. There would have been more exposure with Democratic debates and so on, choosing a candidate. But ultimately, would this have made any difference in the election? I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. So it's very difficult to tell whether that would have actually produced a different result at the end of the day. But there is clearly an awful lot of blame to go around and a lot of soul-searching to be done by the Democratic Party.
And Rowan, we're still waiting for the final results when it comes to the House of Representative elections. Where do we stand with those?
Yeah, I mean, we're expecting, I think it looks more and more certain that the Republicans may well have a majority in the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of the two chambers of the House of Congress, the lawmaking body in the United States. And the significance of that, if they do get a majority in the House of Representatives, is that Donald Trump and Donald Trump's party, the Republicans, will effectively control all of the levers when it comes to passing legislation. They will control the presidency, the upper chamber, the Senate, and the House, the lower chamber. And that means it's going to be much more straightforward for Donald Trump to pass his legislation, to introduce his agenda, to take the country in a much more rightward direction than it has been under Joe Biden, because he will have control of all of the levers to get legislation passed through.
That was Warren Bridge in Washington for us. Well, the Republican strategist Malik Abdul told me what he believes went wrong for the Democrats in this campaign.
Well, I think what Democrats have successfully done over these years, they've painted everyone with this MAGA brush. So if you believe that biological boys shouldn't be participating in competitive sports against biological girls, then that was a MAGA extremist position. If you believed things around education, charter schools, a number of these positions, they said were MAGA extremist positions. And so I think that the Democratic Party simply did not understand the electorate, and they believed that really campaigning on the issue, for instance, on abortion, that they could win on a national issue such as that. But also part of their problem that they've had over these years is that this sort of antipathy towards Donald Trump, and it blinded them in a way that they didn't see that for many people, they didn't care as much about Donald Trump's character. They cared about what he would do as a politician, as some of those that in your interviewees actually spoke about in the previous clip.
So help me understand, was this an anti-Democrat vote or was it a pro-Trump vote then?
So it was a mixture of both. Of course, you know, the last time around when Donald Trump won in 2020, he got the most votes, 74 million votes for an incumbent U.S. president. He got about, I think, 72 million votes. So all of those, that's a hodgepodge. That's 72 million. There are, of course, his diehard supporters. There are those who are just traditional Republicans. But then he actually made inroads with the Hispanic community. And even in places like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in 2020, Donald Trump got 10% of the black male vote. In 2024, that number was 26%. So it's a mixture. So it's not one specific type of those who would support Donald Trump. He really did touch all over the country, not just winning the Electoral College, but for the first time since 2004, a Republican president won the actual popular vote, which is a very huge deal.
Malik, we don't have much time, but looking at the US from abroad, the Trump presidency, the first time round, was characterized, it seemed, with chaos and a polarization of the country. What can we expect from a second Trump presidency now?
Well, I think with the selection of Susie Wiles as the first woman White House chief of staff, I think that's a signal that Donald Trump plans to be more disciplined this time around. You know, you can correct your mistakes from that first time. And so I think that we're going to see more discipline. Donald Trump at the end of the day still will be Donald Trump. But I think that there are a number of things, and he realizes that now his legacy is these next 4 years. So I think that there will be some changes. Donald Trump will be Donald Trump, but I think that there will be some positive improvements, not just on the domestic scale, but on the geopolitical scale as well.
And that was the Republican strategist Malik Abdul there.